Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Before we move on to the first panel of this symposium, due to safe distancing measures, during Q&A we'll not be able to pass mics around. So allow us to very quickly introduce you to the software we will be using for this purpose. To participate in the question and answer session for this panel, or any other panel, please join us on Pigeonhole Live, an easy-to-use platform where you can submit questions for the panel of speakers. If you have a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop computer with you, just launch your internet browser and enter what you see on the screen, www.pigeonhole.at, into the address bar. Next, key in our passcode, which is ArtSymp2021. Once again, ArtSymp2021. You will then, or you should see, all the panels in this symposium listed. Please select the relevant panel and submit your questions. So you can begin submitting questions throughout this panel and throughout the symposium, and they will be directed to the panel moderator. The Pigeonhole URL and event passcode will also be flashed again during each panel for your easy reference. With that out of the way, it is now my great pleasure to introduce you to our very first panel for this symposium entitled Creating and Holding Space for Art, Artists, and Audiences. This panel explores the impact of cultural policy and urban planning with a focus on the importance of arts and cultural sites, as well as arts facilities in defining and shaping distinct characteristics of urban districts. Please welcome our panelists, Mr. Wilson Tan and moderator Ms. Usha Chandradas, here with us in person, and dialing in from Indonesia and Hong Kong respectively, we have Mr. Seeto and Ms. Teoh Chin. So over to you, Usha.
Thank you so much, Pauline, and thank you everybody for joining us here at Victoria Theatre, and also to our international audience who's watching the live stream on Cystic Live. It is my great joy and pleasure to welcome you today. So our very first panel for this symposium is entitled Creating and Holding Space for Art, Artists, and Audiences. Now, we're very pleased today to have with us three very esteemed speakers from Singapore, Indonesia, and Hong Kong. And before I invite them to say a little bit more about their work, let me just give you all a little bit more information about my guests today. So first, we have with us Mr. Wilson Tan, who is here with me and our live audience at Victoria Theatre. And Wilson is the Deputy Chairman of the National Arts Council and Chairman of the Arts House Limited. Wilson retired in 2019 as the Chief Retail Innovation Officer of CapitaLand, and prior to this appointment, he was the Chief Executive Officer of CapitaLand Mall Trust. Wilson is currently the Chairman of EasyLink Private Limited, a transit stored value payment organization. He has also served in various boards and advisory committees in private, education, and government-related organizations. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for joining us. And now let me invite our callers in from overseas. If we could have them join us in our discussion, our two speakers, Ms. Teoh Chin and Mr. Seeto.
Hi, Chin, and hi, Aaron. Thank you for joining us. So dialing in from Hong Kong, we have Ms. Teoh Chin. Chin's work experience spans both the cultural and finance fields. So she was appointed in April 2020 as the director of the Jockey Club CPS Limited, the not-for-profit operator of Taekwon, the Centre for Heritage and the Arts. Prior to joining Taekwon, Chin was one of the founding co-directors who led the opening of CHAT, a groundbreaking non-profit art centre which was transformative for the Mills Heritage destination in Hong Kong. And finally, last and of course absolutely not the least, joining us from Indonesia is Mr. Seeto. Aaron is the director of Museum MACAN in Jakarta and has vast experience in working to advance the goals of contemporary art organizations. He's also curated many significant exhibitions of artists from the Asian and Pacific regions. Aaron was formerly curatorial manager of Asian and Pacific art at the Queensland Art Gallery and Gallery of Modern Art in Brisbane, Australia, where he led the curatorial team at the 8th Asia Pacific Triennial of Contemporary Art, so APT8, in 2015. For 8 years prior to that, he was the director of Sydney's groundbreaking 4A Centre for Contemporary Asian Art. So welcome once again, Wilson, Aaron, and Chin Chin. So now, as we know, this panel is really about the impact of cultural policy and urban planning with a focus on the importance of arts and cultural sites within communities. And of course, this year, we have a really additional layer of concern, the COVID-19 global pandemic, which has closed arts and culture spaces for months and required so many institutions to make a pivot to the digital space from the physical. Okay, so I'd like to kick off this panel discussion by inviting our speakers to share a little bit more about their work in the context of arts and cultural zoning in their respective countries, and also how their art spaces have been impacted by this terrible pandemic. So let's start with you, Wilson. Now, you're both chairman of the Arts House as well as deputy chairman of the National Arts Council. Could you tell us a little bit more about the work of the Arts House, the role that it occupies in Singapore's cultural landscape, and how you've responded to the challenges presented by this COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you, Usha. Thank you for the question. That's lots of questions, lots of time that I would have to take, so I will try and keep it very crisp to the point. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. And it's really good to see you live and also online. Arts House Limited. This is an organization where we run 5 venues. So Victoria Theatre, Victoria Concert Hall, where we are in right now, this is one of the venues that we run. There is also directly behind this particular venue itself, we have the Old Parliament House. If you have not been to the Old Parliament House, I would urge you to go in, visit that space. That's where the original Singapore Parliament was. There's another place that we have as a venue, and this is at SAW Art Centre. SAW Art Centre is really in the heart of the Arab Street area, and that's where we do promote quite a fair bit of local street art. Maybe later on I can describe and share a little bit more about that itself. We have in the east itself a place called Goodman Art Centre. Goodman Art Centre is a place, a lovely place where family can go to. You've got many artists in residence there, and that's where you're able to participate in many art events, basically for families. Last but not least, at the National Library itself, we have Drama Centre, and that's also the venue that we have. If you look at all these venues, you will recognize that they are quite spread out in the central part and also the eastern part of Singapore. That's where we are also able to bring art to the community. And that's the purpose of Arts House. Besides managing all these spaces that we have, we also run the Singapore International Festival of Arts that happens every year in May itself. So do watch out for this year's event that will happen in May. We are keeping all our fingers crossed, and we hope that you can join us and participate in this particular event itself. We are also the manager, and we manage Singapore Writers Festival, and that's something that we do also within the remit of Arts House Limited. So that's generally what we do. Perhaps I can also, Usha, just share a little bit more about what we see, the function, the roles of AHL itself. Inevitably, last year, when we had the or we are still in the midst of the pandemic, the question was raised with regards to the importance and the relevance of arts and culture in our midst. I think it is relevant that we ask this question and show clearly why art and culture indeed define ourselves as people. Because it is the people at the end of the day that we should keep our focus on. And as an extension of the people, it is truly art and culture. And I think that's where HL tries also to reach out to both the artist community and also the audiences that can participate in the different art sectors itself. And that's one clear area that AHL has as a role. The other part that AHL can continue also to play an important place in terms of what we can do and make the difference for Singapore is that we recognize that gentrification is part and parcel of urban renewal, of urban planning. And we also recognize that this can in itself be fairly political. How do we go around to mitigate some of the challenges, whether it is from a political standpoint or from a social standpoint? And I would like to say that art and culture could mitigate some of these challenges and could also go out and actually enhance social cohesion. And that's something that AHL, through our different festivals, whether it's CIFA, whether it's SWF, or through the different programs that we do within AHL, that's where we have a role in terms of gentrification of the precinct of the constituency that we are in. So that's some of the things that AHL is doing.
Thank you so much, Wilson. That was very, very informative about the role of the Arts House Limited. Now, Chin Chin, could I invite you to give us a short introduction to yourself and Taekwon and how you've dealt with the COVID-19 challenges. Now, I understand that you have some videos to play, so please, the stage and the screen are yours. So if you just let our producers know when you're ready to have each video played, you can verbally cue them and we'll have those lined up for you. Over to you.
Right. Thank you, Usha, and thanks for inviting me to participate in the Art Symposium in the Singapore Art Week. And greetings from Hong Kong to all my fellow Singaporeans and members in the audience. I wish I was there with you physically today, but thanks to Zoom, we could actually have this conversation. So I'm the director of Teoh in Hong Kong, and I'm not very sure if all of you are familiar with the site. So I actually like to first perhaps show a very short 1-minute video clip that gives you a glimpse of what Teoh really is before speaking about it. So if you kindly could ask the producers to help play that first video, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for that. So Taekwon in Mandarin, it means 大馆, and in Cantonese means 大馆. And the words actually mean big station in Chinese. And this is a really colloquial name that we picked to name this very site, which is actually consisting of 3 declared monuments of Hong Kong in the Central District. So these 3 declared monuments include the Central Police Station, the Central Magistracy, and the Victoria Prison. And the buildings that are on this site really date as early back as the 1850s, all the way to the early 20th century. But in addition to the 16 historical buildings, Herzog de Meuron has also added 2 fantastically wonderful buildings. One is a contemporary art building called the JC Contemporary, as well as an auditorium called the JCQ. Now, the site in itself, as you can imagine, historically was the site of law and order, where it was envisioned by the colonial government. At that time, it would be the one-stop shop where someone would, if arrested by the police, would then be tried in the Central Magistracy and sent straight to jail in Victoria Prison. Now, to convert something of this nature that used to have this very forbidding feeling to it, to a vibrant, opening, kind of welcoming cultural site, obviously, is something we really put our hearts and minds to do. And really what we would like to achieve is a model of best practice in heritage conservation. And for that, we're really proud to say that Dai Kun won the Award of Excellence from UNESCO in 2019 for the Asia Pacific Awards of Cultural Heritage Conservation. Now, besides being a model of best practice in heritage conservation in the middle of Central, most importantly, I think the next step is that Dai Kun in itself needs to serve as a place of inspiration, of stimulation, of enjoyment that makes Hong Kong people proud and encourages their participation on our site. Now, since we opened in May 2018, we've had a spectacular year of activity, as you can see on the video. And we program on 3 fields of programming, including heritage-based exhibitions, heritage storytelling journeys as one group. And we have the contemporary arts programming arm, the Dai Kun Contemporary, which is a non-collecting art institution that brings in really fantastic shows that we curate in that space. And then also the performing arts, in which we will work with local performing groups, the Hong Kong Philharmonic, the Hong Kong Ballet, etc., to bring in performances to the space. Now, since COVID happened, we have been obviously also trying to find ways to still continue that sort of interaction and relationship with our audience, both internationally and locally. And I actually, at this point, perhaps would like to play the second video to show you what we've been trying to do to cope with this new set of operating circumstances that we are now under. So if may ask if you could play the second video, please. Thank you. Yeah, so this second video really highlights perhaps some of the changes that we've tried to make during this very difficult year around 4 guiding principles. So how do we keep our collaborative spirit alive with other art groups within Hong Kong and our creative energies as a group? So in the first part, you may have seen, it's our collaboration with the Hong Kong Philharmonic on a newly composed piece by the chief timpanist. And he was reflecting on how social distancing changes the relationships between musicians and that they could no longer perform together. And so this multimedia piece was created by Oliver Shing as a director to allow the Hong Kong Philharmonic performers to perform this newly composed piece on separate locations in the Daikun Contemporary Building. As you can see, that sweeping staircase, which is actually a contemporary art gallery that's now closed. And but now we are able to then have musicians inside and put a really wonderful video. So you could listen to the actual piece itself and that video on our website. So another principle, the second principle that we always wanted to embrace was how do we still continue to allow visitors to see Daikun as a contemporary space that is now activated with contemporary artists. And you would see in that we've invited our highly popular recurring circus event that we usually hold at the end of the year, to have these performers now performing within our space with no audience, but with live circus, with video options for people to watch the circus programs. And as you can see, there's also docent tours that now guide people through the digital, to the heritage galleries and through the whole site, really in a very informative and immersive manner. And of course, the one other thing I always wanted to emphasize is Daikun doesn't exist in a vacuum. It really needs to also be a really great partner to the art ecosystem in Hong Kong, which obviously is really in need of our support as well. So the last snip that you saw was actually our collaboration with the Hong Kong Art Galleries Association. And because of the cancellation of so many events, Art Basel, and postponement and all that, there was really also a really hard time for art galleries in Hong Kong to reach out to their audience through the typical art fest that we have held. So at Daikun, we actually hosted Unscheduled, which consisted of 12 Hong Kong galleries at the end of June, to allow them to present the artists that they had under who were represented by them in this exhibition and this fair. So that kind of wraps up my short presentation today, and perhaps I would hand this back to Usha, and we could have another conversation and welcome your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chin Chin. That was a really nice introduction to the work that you've been doing. Aaron, can I invite you to tell us a bit more about your work in MACAN now, please?
Thank you, Usha, and thank you for the invitation to present today. It's good to see everybody wherever they are. So firstly, I want to quickly introduce you to Museum MACAN. And we were just discussing in the waiting room that actually we're almost a similar age, Daikun and Museum MACAN. Museum MACAN was opened in November 2017. And I wanted to share some observations of how we've been working in the current COVID-19 landscape, and also as a way to contribute a few ideas to discussion. We're a very new cultural institution in Jakarta, and I believe in a short period of time, we've contributed in a very positive way to the cultural infrastructure in Indonesia, but also to the fabric of the city of Jakarta. Our focus is not only on the presentation of exhibitions, but also on the delivery of art education and art appreciation programs. And so I think that this split between the physical and then also the educational has really helped us to navigate some of the current challenges that we have. The social and cultural impacts of a museum on a city are important to underline, especially for this discussion, because they give physical manifestation to the artistic community by providing infrastructure to exhibit, to learn, to experience, and to contemplate. But what happens when the physical is replaced by the digital? And in the context of this panel, how are we to understand the quality and nature of public space, placemaking, etc., in the context of a city, and ideas of public space where these things are no longer physical? So this is a very short, and I'm going to talk on top of the presentation. It's a very short 1-minute video that we produced. So that video was produced obviously before COVID-19, and it's a video that was taken of our First Sight program. It was a two-part performance art project which we did before we officially opened to the public. It was a way of being able to introduce ideas of the museum to a non-museum going public, and to also introduce what the space of the museum would look like. It was very successful. Tickets were booked out within hours, and we managed to engage with a very wide base, who for many was the first time to be inside the museum. The identity of museums and other organizations is really intertwined with the concepts of public space and civic amenity. And in the early days, since we opened, also for the museum, we've always seen the museum as a place to come together, to physically engage, and especially for performance art, where both artists and the public are required to be in the same space. How do we navigate the future for a young organization? This slide here, I just wanted to give, maybe not everyone understands where we are. We're in West Jakarta, and it's not normally a place where you would expect to have a museum. The city of Jakarta has about 2.5 million people. Before COVID, it would fluctuate to about 20 million people as people came in and came out for work. And it'd be really interesting to see whether or not these numbers still exist. And in terms of the COVID situation, as of yesterday, I think that we're having about 3,000 new cases in Jakarta alone. We've provided a little bit of information about internet, because I think that if we're talking about the shift towards the digital, we have to understand how do we reach out? Who is the public? Who is the internet? Who is the public who is able to participate through the internet? At the moment, about over 70% of the national population has access to internet. And Indonesia has a very social media. There's 60 million users of social media. Okay, I'm just trying to shift the slides. Here we go. Okay, I'll just switch a bit forward. One of the challenges that we have, of course, is that access to internet is unequal, and we're really aware as we're developing our digital programs that there is a social and economic challenge ahead of us. That not everyone our idea of talking broadly to the public is modulated by people's access to the internet. And that it becomes fundamental for us as we look at and we define our programs. So where are we at the moment? Well, we temporarily closed the museum on the 14th of March. This was after about 11 days of having opened 2 new major exhibitions to the public. We are hoping to be able to reopen again to the public in the next little while, but there are constant reevaluations of the situation, but both by the government and also internally. And like lots of people, we shifted online. So we've developed a museum from home project, working with lots of our partners to develop new programs specifically for student and educators. Sorry, I'm trying. Okay. Key things as we design our programs is that we're really conscious about this accessibility issue. This idea about who our public is and how we reach that public needs to really be addressed. We were deliberately much slower in producing new content. We went through a process of digitizing things that we had already done. Because we opened in 2017, we had already an idea that our digital life and our digital presence was a big part of our offering to the public, considering how much information is shared through social media. And then one of the final things, reiterating this idea of social media becomes really important for us. We're not afraid of thinking through how to harness it, and also thinking through some of the challenges that are also inherent within social media. So I think that we've been quite successful for a small museum, for a small organization. And this is probably the silver lining for this, is that we are able to engage across a much bigger geography. You know, Indonesia is a big population. It's over 250 million people. Before COVID, when we were doing our programming simply as physical programming, we would be limited by accessibility within Jakarta. Now we're able to talk much more broadly, and we're able to deliver our programs to in much more interesting ways, I think. So we've had over 150,000 hits on our website, and I suppose these two in the middle, we run a podcast which introduces key concepts in contemporary arts. We've had over 7,000 downloads of these podcasts. We would never be able to fill an auditorium of 7,000 people to listen to academics talk about art. And then the other one, the middle one on the right, is a collection guide that we delivered on social media, because we understood that social media was light, and we got the curators to write and to present collection information online. So this painting of Aramayani, the Indonesian artist, has been accessed nearly 24,000 times. And I think in terms of being able to mobilize social media for education, this is maybe an important way for us to do it. We're about to deliver some what we call hybrid encounters. We've been working with both the artists and also with our partners to repackage some of our programs. So this is our latest UOB Children's Art Space Commission by Chitra Sesmi. It was supposed to be only a physical encounter, but over the last 9 months, we've been working with her and also teams of people to refigure this project for the online environment. And you can engage with it online. Feel free over the next little while. We've got a storytelling project, which is a social media program. We have also... feel free, have a look online. I'll leave the presentation there, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And thank you all three of our panelists, for giving us so much insight into what you're doing. Now, I'm mindful of the time that we need to adhere to for this live stream. So I'm just going to remind everyone that, you can actually ask your questions via the Pigeonhole platform that we're using. And this will appear again on your screens. And if you're here in Victoria Theatre, on the projector behind me. So, just go straight to that URL and key in your questions if you have any for the panelists. Now, Pauline has actually already gone through the details before we kicked off, so we do have some questions lined up. And I really would just like to dive right into it. I mean, Aaron, if I could start with you. What I thought was so impressive was that, you talked about the inherent problems in Indonesia, the instability of internet connections, the lack of access that people have to digital platforms. But yet, you've managed to overcome these challenges to have such an impressive online participation record and rates for your programming. So could you share a little bit more about how you managed to achieve that?
Well, thanks, Usha. I think there's still more work for us to do. I think that this is really just a starting point. It really was tied into how we thought about the establishment of the museum. I mean, we thought really carefully about who we wanted to come to the museum. I mean, who is our public? And we've really drilled down in ways to communicate with them. being a young institution and also being an institution in a situation where there isn't lots of established infrastructure really allowed the teams to experiment on how to do that. There's not the same stigmas, I think, in Indonesia around social media as there are in other places. So I think that's actually has been really quite helpful for us, because it's given us a kind of a fresh opportunity to think about experimentation.
Thank you. Okay, you know what? Our questions are just coming in fast and furious, so I'm just going to launch right into them just to bring across the views that you're expressing through Pigeonhole. The question that we have the most votes for right now actually is directed to you, Wilson, and to Chin Chin. And the question is, your background, Chin Chin, is in finance, and Wilson, too, you have a commercial background. So can you tell us a bit more about how that has influenced you in your art journey in general? And I'm just going to expand that a little bit, because we're also talking about pandemic responses. So how has that background actually featured in the way that you've approached this problem that we've all had to deal with this year? Chin Chin, could I invite you to go first?
Sure. Sure. I think, yes, the finance background was definitely a very helpful and useful one, because as we are going through a really different and operating circumstances that we are dealing with right now, it's always having to rethink, and what's a better deployment of your financial resources? How would then you generate new revenue streams? Or how would you then reinvest something that you had designated for a on-site exhibition that now could not be open? So I think I have to say that that finance background was really highly helpful when it comes to thinking about how about sustainability as a whole, and that in itself, I think, was something I was able to really adapt into this role very well. But the other thing I really wanted to mention that is actually more importantly to be running an art space. The mission here has to be really looked at not only from a financial standpoint, because we are delivering actually intangible value also to people. We are run as a non-profit organization. So really that when it comes to trying to make a balanced budget, that's something I do. But what we're trying to deliver to the audience and to the visitors who come to Daegun is really that seamless that once they are on site, they have available to them really wonderful world-class exhibitions, affordable performances, and then a whole suite of other F&B and tenants that actually are also our stakeholders on this site that we also consciously manage, because as you can imagine, during the pandemic, one sector that's particularly hard hit would be the F&B and the retail sector in Hong Kong. So obviously we had also had to consider how would we then try to balance our support for that segment that also comprises and constitutes part of the Daegun experience for our visitors. So, well, in a nutshell, I have to say that it's a year of really balancing and rebalancing and trying to get to the right position where we felt that Daegun is still going to be open, vibrant, welcoming, but at the same time, it is completely compliant to the changing regulations and while maintaining its sustainability. So yeah, it's a balancing act, I have to say. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wilson.
Thank you. I would start off with saying that experience may be a bad word in our new world that we live in the pandemic world that we lived in. And just relying on the word experience itself would potentially fossilize us. So I would suggest that even with the commercial experience itself, that could assist, that could help, but it's not the end-all world, the know-all world. I think the key here, and I think it's important to recognize that arts and culture is about people, it's about our heritage. it's about where we came from, who we are today, and how we can create a better world tomorrow. And I think that's really important when we start looking at arts and culture and creating and holding spaces for this. And if we keep our focus on that, then I really think we can make a difference for the art ecosystem that we are in. Perhaps one word that I would like to add for every one of us here, including our listeners who are online itself, would like to suggest that art advocacy is very, very important. If we could go out and advocate why art is important, why it's truly the internal soul that the people have, the populace have, and how it can translate physical spaces and also virtual spaces. It can translate not only the art and cultural spaces, but commercial spaces. And that advocacy becomes very, very important. And that's something I think I would suggest that we in this space, in this room, and those of you who are online can spend a little bit more attention on.
Thank you, Wilson. Now, we're getting so many good questions coming in. It's really difficult for me to pick what I should really be pushing through to the panelists, but I'm going to go with the majority. We have a number of votes, actually, for this question for you, Aaron. And the question is, as a privately funded institution, what are your priorities? Do you prioritize outreach to your wider community? Or, for example, do you prioritize the management of your permanent collection and I suppose the interests of your founder? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
That's a really good question. I think the answer is that the Museum MACAN is a private museum, but we are built as a public space. So we have private capital which developed the museum, but we have a civic mission. We have a mission about creating access for the public to both the collection and also to exhibitions. I think that mix between managing stakeholders versus managing private stakeholders and managing public stakeholders is actually the same in a public institution as it is in a private museum. I think that most public museums also have a private interaction or sponsorship or a private forms of income, and I think that this is at least now. I mean, the 21st century, there is a much less defined. That is less defined what is public and what is private, and I think that Museum MACAN is really guided by its mission.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Okay, we're actually coming to the end of the time that we have for our live stream, but we have so many good questions coming in. I wish this panel could go on for another 45 minutes. For those of you who sent your questions in, we'll make sure that they get to the panelists. There'll be videos on demand after we present this screening on Cystic Live. And there'll also be write-ups to look out for on the Singapore Art Week website. So we'll find a way to get some of the questions answered, perhaps through that mechanism as well. So with that, it just leaves me to thank Wilson for joining me today, Chin Chin and Aaron in Hong Kong and Indonesia. Thank you so much for your time and for all the wonderful information you have shared with us. It's been really, really illuminating. And we thank you very much for that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay healthy in Singapore.
Thank you, Wilson, Aaron, Chin Chin, and Usha for the illuminating discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a short break for the changeover in panels, and we hope you continue to stay with us. The next panel will commence at 4 o'clock. Thank you.